The battle for the White House. With days to go before the crucial Iowa caucuses, the Democratic candidates for president square off in a final debate in Des Moines and focus on the issues that matter most to America's minorities: the economy, health care, immigration. Where do the contenders stand? For the next 2 hours, the Democrats who would be president answer the key questions and debate the tough issues.
From MSNBC, this is the Iowa Brown and Black Presidential Forum. Now, from the Polk County Convention Center in Des Moines, Iowa, here are Lester Holt and Maria Celeste Araras.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to this 2-hour presidential candidates debate organized by the Iowa Brown and Black Presidential Forum. This is the 5th debate organized by the Forum since it was founded in 1984, and we're honored to bring it to you again in the 2004 election campaign.
8 de los 9 candidatos demócratas que aspiran a la presidencia de los Estados Unidos ya están aquí. Esta será la última vez que debatirán antes que los votantes de este estado asistan al concilio y escojan a uno de ellos como su nominado para representar al Partido Demócrata. And since I'm sure that Lester didn't get much of that, I'm going to have to translate, don't I?
Are you kidding? She took the words right out of my mouth.
Well, okay, I'll go for it. 8 of the 9 candidates competing for the Democratic Party are here. It is the last time they will debate before the voters in this state attend the caucuses and pick one of them as Iowa's choice for Democratic nominee. Let me introduce them to you now, and please withhold your applause until the end. First, Representative Richard Gephardt. Governor Howard Dean. Senator Joe Lieberman. Reverend Al Sharpton. Representative Dennis Kucinich. Senator John Edwards. Senator John Kerry. And Ambassador Carol Mosley Braun. We'd like to point out that General Wesley Clark did not accept an invitation to participate in this debate.
Now, a few words about our format tonight. Agreed to by all the candidates. The position of the candidates on the stage was decided in a random draw. The candidates will have 60 seconds to answer questions and 30 seconds for a rebuttal or follow-up at the moderator's discretion. Also, each of the candidates will be invited to ask one question of a fellow candidate on any subject at some point during the debate.
And during the debate, we will also take questions from a group of distinguished African American and Latino leaders brought together by the organizers of tonight's debate, who we would like to acknowledge: the co-chairs of the Iowa Brown and Black Presidential Forum, Mary Campos and Wayne Ford. Now my colleague Lester Holt will begin the questioning. Lester.
All right, Maria Celeste, thanks very much. And I'd like to begin the debate by posing a question to you, Governor Dean. There's been a lot of controversy here in Iowa, as you know, on your views regarding the caucus system. An Iowa voter with one of the subjects we want to get in tonight, that is the economy. And to lead that part of our discussion, here again is Maria Celeste. Maria?
Thank you. And this is a question that the little guys ask themselves. And this question is first for Senator Kerry. The president and many economists agree or say that the economy is in a recovery. Do you agree with that? Do you think it's moving forward, backward, or is it simply stagnant?
I think it's a Bush League recovery. It's a recovery for the people in the corporate boardroom. It's a recovery for corporations to some degree by compacting, by increasing productivity. But if you go across America, it's not a recovery. They promised, or had to, try to create 250,000 jobs last month. They created 1,000. I mean, they only fell 249,000 jobs short. And a whole bunch of Americans, maybe 200,000 of them, even stopped looking for work. This recovery is a recovery for those people who have stock. It's a recovery for those people who are able to walk away with the highest salaries. But workers have only seen a 3 cents an hour increase in their wages. They've actually seen a $1,500 loss in their income. As president, I'm going to roll back the tax cut for the wealthiest Americans so we can invest in education, in health care, in our cities, in our communities, and do the things that a president ought to do to build the strength of our country. And that is not only critical to our standing here at home. If we're not strong here in our economy at home, we're never going to be able to lead the free world and be strong in the war on terror abroad. It's all connected, and this president just doesn't seem to understand that.
Okay, I'd like to pass the same question to Senator Kucinich.
The economists who are talking about recovery are the same economists who believe that a certain amount of unemployment is necessary to the functioning of the economy. It's easy for them to say they have jobs. The truth of the matter is that we should have a full employment economy. With the government, the employer of last resort, there ought to be jobs, enough jobs for all who want to work. And as president, I will create a full employment economy by sponsoring a WPA-type program which will rebuild America's cities and rural communities, new bridges, water systems, sewer systems, new energy systems, put millions of people back to work. We need to create jobs. We also have to save the jobs we have. Trade laws are permitting our manufacturing base to be absolutely devastated. We've lost steel, automotive, aerospace, shipping, and textiles. As the next president, recognizing the destructive effect that NAFTA and the WTO have had, I will cancel NAFTA and the WTO and return to bilateral trade conditioned on workers' rights, human rights, and environmental quality principles.
Thank you, Senator Kucinich. And I'd like to pass on my next question to Representative Gephardt. Even though all of you have talked about budget balance as a goal, I want to talk about jobs. And I'd like to know, in your opinion, what is the correct number of unemployment, an acceptable number of unemployment? Please give me your target number, and what would you do, and how long would it take you to achieve it?
Well, my target would be 0. That's what we need to work toward. And I would remind you that at the end of the Clinton administration, we had unemployment in the country down to 3%.
Is zero possible?
It is possible. I think we surprised everybody during the Clinton years as to what we achieved. There were a lot of economists who said, oh, you can't get to 3% unemployment, you'll have inflation. We did things that really got people to be employed. We increased the minimum wage, and that's the first thing that I would do. I'd also ask the World Trade Organization for an international minimum wage. So it'd be different in different countries. We got to start getting the standard of living up for people all across the world. My health care plan would create 750,000 new jobs by getting everybody covered with health care insurance. And I got an energy plan called Apollo 21 that would create 2 million new jobs in this country, creating renewable fuels. A lot of it could be here in the Midwest with ethanol and wind and solar that would be clean energy. And my teacher corps idea would get young people to be teachers. If they teach for 5 years, I'd pay their college loans. These are the kind of job-creating ideas that this country needs, that we did in the Clinton administration, but this administration has marched us in the opposite direction. This president must be defeated.
And it's an Apollo plan for planet Earth, correct? Not Mars.
Yeah, right. Planet Earth, not Mars.
Thank you. My next question is for Reverend Al Sharpton. And the latest job statistics show almost no increase in employment across the country, and also show that hundreds of thousands of workers left the job market. They simply disappear. The challenge to find good jobs in the African American and Latino communities are even harder, as we all know. What would you do to reduce unemployment in these communities in particular?
You have to have a job creation program. I've proposed throughout this campaign a $250 billion 5-year plan to create jobs that are necessary: infrastructure redevelopment, roadways, highways, bridges, tunnels, school buildings, and in the name of Homeland Security, ports. We ought to be investing in creating jobs. That's what Roosevelt did with public works programs. I think that Congressman Kucinich is right. We must go after A, what is necessary, and B, what will create jobs. The recovery is like if you went to a hospital and all the doctors and nurses had a cold, they got over the cold and we say it was recovery. But the sick people are still sick. So you've got some of the managers of America recovering, but those that are ill are just as sick as they ever was. Recovery is not for the staff. Recovery is for the patients. The patients, Mr. Bush, are still sick.
Okay, well, thank you, Reverend. And as we've been saying, we're also going to be taking questions from a distinguished panel of experts. And Lester is right now with one of them and their questions. Go ahead.
Maria, thanks. I'm with Professor Greg Rocha of the University of Texas at El Paso. Dr. Rocha, good evening to you. Thanks for taking part.
Thank you.
Your question is to who?
I have a question for Senator Kerry and also for you, Reverend Sharpton, and it concerns unemployment. Over the past decade, we've seen that The unemployment rate for Latinos has been about 40% higher, and for African Americans, it's been about 80% higher than the overall rate. Why do you think that condition has existed, and what would you do to start to close that gap?
For me first?
Yes.
I think it exists. I think we're allowed to walk out here. I think it exists because, I don't know if the lights are working.
Yeah, unfortunately, the lights aren't working, so it's your choice.
So we can't move around. Well, I thought that we were able to move around. Let me just say to you, look, the reason that exists is because we have an indifference, a casual indifference in the leadership of our country that ignores the fact that we have a separate and unequal school system in the United States of America, that we adults in the United States are literally abandoning millions of children every single day, that we have too much willingness to send people to prison rather than invest $10,000 a year in Head Start, Early Start, Smart Start, early childhood education. There is a complete abdication of responsibility. And those people who run around this country talking about compassionate conservatism have shown compassion only for conservatives and for the wealthiest people in the country. We need a president who's going to fight against those special interests, have early education 0 to 8. We need a president who's going to fight to fund those schools. No child left behind he's walked away from. It hurts the urban communities the most and the rural communities the most. We've got to change our attitude about how you raise kids in America, how you provide opportunity, and it's always worse in the minority centers because that's where the greatest level of poverty is and the lack of voting power. We need a president who stands up and fights for America.
And I believe you were also addressing that question to Reverend Sharpton.
Yes, yes, sir.
I think that we definitely need all that Senator Kerry outlined. But on top of that, we must be honest about discrimination and have a president that will enforce anti-discrimination laws. It is not as a result of some magic that Latinos are at that rate or blacks at that rate. We still have institutional discrimination in this country, which is worse than blatant discrimination. What is hurting us is that 50 years ago we had to watch out for people with white sheets. Now they have on pinstripe suits, and they discriminate against our advancement, they discriminate against our achievement, and we're called divisive if we bring it up. We're divisive if we don't bring it up. We had to fight, our fathers had to fight Jim Crow. We've got to fight James Crow Jr. Esquire, and we need to take on that fight.
Reverend Sharpton, thank you, and Dr. Rocha, thank you very much as well. Maria.
Yes, I have another economic question, this time for Governor Dean. And do you want to make a quick comment, because I've seen you?
Ask the last question.
Go right ahead.
Could I please? Thank you. One of the issues has to do with the private sector and creating jobs. And when you consider that Latina women make 53 cents on the dollar, African American women make 68 cents on the dollar, and white women make 73 cents for every dollar that a man makes, the disparities are very clear, both as to race and gender. I think the answer lies in providing capital for the development of jobs and businesses in communities where people live. Because if you if you give someone the ability to create a business, provide equity capital, give people the ability to begin to create those businesses that will help lift up communities, that will go a long way to solving the endemic problem of institutional racism, of discrimination, and of the lack of jobs in African American and Hispanic communities.
Thank you very much. I had to make that exception because you're the other lady in red in the room. Thank you. Okay, Governor Dean, despite your desire to roll back all the Bush tax cuts, you recently said you will roll out your own tax fairness plan, including some kind of payroll tax cut. When will your plan be ready, and will your middle-class tax relief be immediate?
The first priority is to balance the budget. We've got to do that. No Republican has balanced the budget in 34 years in this country. You just can't trust Republicans with your money anymore. Secondly, in order to do that, you've got to roll back the Bush tax cut. Now, 60% of us got a $304 tax cut. If you make $1 million, you got a $112,000 tax cut. But people's college tuition has gone up more than $304. People's property taxes have gone up more than $304 because the president cut fire and police, wouldn't fund special education, wouldn't fund No Child Left Behind. People's health care payments have gone up because this president cut 500,000 children off health care in the last 2 years. or nearly 1 million adults off health care. So somebody has to pay for that. It's our insurance companies who then pass it along to us. There was no middle-class tax cut in this country.
So let me interrupt you 1 second. Would you wait then till you balance your budget to then go ahead with the middle
That's right.
class
The
budget?
first priority is balancing the budget. And what we will do is lay out a plan to balance the budget and include some sort of plan to increase corporate taxes, just as Joe Lieberman has suggested, because corporate taxes are now at the lowest level since 1934, which means the rest of us are paying the rest of the tax burden, and that's not fair. You know, the truth is, we ought to go back to Bill Clinton's taxes, because most people in America would gladly pay the taxes we paid when Bill Clinton was president, if only we could have the same economy we had when Bill Clinton was president.
You want to react to that, Kucinich?
I think the tax cuts that are going to the people in the top brackets are the ones that ought to be canceled. We need to remember the working families still need relief, earned income tax credit and other tax relief. But the thing that I am wondering about is how in the world can Governor Dean take the position that he's going to balance the budget, but he said repeatedly that he won't touch Pentagon spending. You know, this is a chart here. Half the discretionary budget of the United States goes for the Pentagon. Now, if you're going to balance the budget and you're not going to touch the Pentagon and you're going to keep a war in Iraq going for a few years, that means you're going to cut, as the president's doing, funds for veterans, housing, health care, education. So I'm saying the solution is get out of Iraq, cut the bloated Pentagon budget by 15%, and stop the tax cuts that are going to the wealthy. That will be the way that we can help our economy.
Governor Dean, you have a 30-second rebuttal time.
Let me talk about the Pentagon budget and why I will not cut the Pentagon budget should I become President of the United States. There are some things I won't do. We will not build tactical battlefield nuclear weapons because we don't need them and they're useless against terrorists. We will not build a national missile defense system until we do the research so it works. But there are an enormous number of needs in defense that aren't getting met. Special operations, that's an anti-terrorist task force. We need more of those. Human intelligence, cyber intelligence. Soldiers aren't paid properly. The President of the United States tried to cut combat pay for our troops in Iraq. Even the right-wing Congress wouldn't let him do that. So in good conscience, and at a time when this president is not making us safe, we're not inspecting the cargo containers that come into this country every day, we're not buying the enriched uranium stocks that we're allowed to buy from the former Soviet Union under cooperative threat reduction agreements. This president is not keeping us safe. What I will do is leave the Pentagon budget alone. We don't have to have these enormous enormous increases that he wants, but we do have to make America safe, and we can't do it by cutting the Pentagon budget.
Okay, Governor Dean, thank you. And obviously you didn't convince Representative Kucinich because he's still holding his paper up, but that's part of the deal. I want to go now to the candidate-to-candidate questions, and this is your turn, Representative Gephardt, to ask any question to whoever you choose in the panel.
Well, Howard, I heard your answer on the middle-class tax cut and on Social Security. You know, early in the year, you and I agreed that we ought to get rid of the Bush tax cuts, that they haven't worked, and I still agree with that. We both said that we shouldn't do anything that would hurt Social Security. In the last few days, I understand, and maybe you're not, but you were talking about a payroll or a Social Security tax cut. And my worry about that is that it would undermine Social Security. Have you decided that that's what we ought to do?
I think cutting the payroll taxes is not a bad idea. It's certainly something we're going to look at. Under no circumstances will we take the money to cut payroll taxes out of the Social Security Trust Fund. That would be absurd. I said so a year ago on Judy Woodruff's show, Inside Politics, that a payroll tax holiday is irresponsible for the same reason a payroll tax cut, should it cut the money going into Social Security, is irresponsible. If we end up cutting payroll taxes, which is the most regressive tax there is for low and moderate income workers, it will come out of the general fund in the form of a tax credit. We will not touch Social Security.
Very well. Next question to another candidate is Mr. Reverend Al Sharpton.
I want to, you know, I have to ask this. I was going to ask Gender something, but I have to ask you this, Governor Dean, because I was disappointed you weren't in Washington the other day. But you keep talking about race. In the state of Vermont, where you were governor, 97, 99, 2001, not one black or brown held a senior policy position, not one. You yourself said we must do something about it. Nothing was done. Can you explain since now you want to convene everyone and talk about race, it seems as though you've discovered blacks and browns during this campaign. How you can explain not one black or brown working for your administration as governor?
Well, I beg to differ with your statistics.
This is according to your paper in Vermont, Associated Press, and the Center for Women in Government.
Well, perhaps you ought not to believe everything in the
so you're saying
Associated
they're
Press.
incorrect?
We do have African American and Latino workers in state government.
No, I said under your administration, you have a senior member of your cabinet that was black or brown.
We had a senior member of my staff on my
your
fifth
cabinet.
floor. No, we did not.
Okay,
There were none of the 6 members.
Then you need to let me talk to you about race in this country.
Well, let me just say one thing, which I've said before, but I'll say it again. If the percentage of African Americans in your state was any indication of what your views on race were, then Trent Lott would be Martin Luther King.
But I don't think that answers the question. I think if you want to lecture people on race, you ought to have the background and track record in order to do that. And I think that clearly, governors import talent, governors reach all over the country to make sure they have diversity. And I think that while I respect the fact you brought race into this campaign, you ought to talk freely and openly about whether you went out of the box to try to do something about race in your home state and have experience with working with blacks and browns at peer level, not as just friends you might have had in college.
Reverend Sharpton, let me pass on now. I'm going to pass on real quick to Senator Edwards, who's been very anxious to make a comment for a while. And obviously you must have something very important to say, so go for it. This is your moment.
Thank you very much. First of all, one of the things that people are concerned about politicians in general and people who are running for president, is that they don't just talk the talk, as the Reverend just talked about, but they've fought for these things and stood for these things and been consistent and been straight with people and not changed their position. How many times have the people of Iowa had people run for president, come into their house, promise them something, they never come back, and then they don't do what they're going to say, right? Have you heard that before? It happens over and over and over, and politicians change their position when the election's coming. Here's the problem. Race is a defining issue in America today. It didn't start when this campaign began in January. It's been true forever. And we have enormous work to do on race. The second thing is, all these discussions about tax cuts and which tax cut, it ignores the bigger picture of what's happening in America today. We've had a sea change in this country in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, most working families, middle-class families, were financially secure, they were saving money, they felt good about their future. That's all changed. Today, these families are saving nothing. They are going into debt. They are one medical problem or financial problem from going off the cliff. We have to help them with all these problems, Dick. We have to help them with their health care. We have to help them by giving them some financial security, specifically helping them to save and be able to invest. But my point is, we can't put these things in boxes. Families out there who are struggling, they don't think about these things in boxes. They need help with all these things. They need health care, but they also need financial security.
Yes or no answer real quick.
Yeah.
Does that mean that if you were president, you will come to Iowa many times after?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to get a rebuttal from Representative Gephardt real quick.
I just wanted to say that on this question of access to capital, I think this is the key question in helping minorities be able to have the same opportunity as everyone else. And one of my proposals that I'm very interested in is changing the percentage of federal contracts that go to minority contracts from 5 to 10%. This would do more to get capital into minority contractors and give people the opportunity they need. We also had a new markets initiative from Bill Clinton, and it's gone by the wayside with this administration. It needs to be renewed and funded so that minorities in this country can get access to capital so they can start small businesses.
Very well. Talking about funding, we need to go to a commercial break real quick. When we come back, we're going to talk about foreign policy. So stay with the battle for the White House.
From MSNBC, this is the Iowa Brown and Black Presidential Forum. Here again, Lester Holt and Maria Celeste Araras.
And welcome back, everyone. Our questioning now continues with Maria.
Thank you, Lester. And we're going to start addressing Reverend Al Sharpton, who is apparently very upset at the fact that he didn't get to answer or have a rebuttal for something that Governor Dean said before, and during the commercial break he expressed so. So this is your chance.
What I wanted to say is that the governor talks about his endorsement. I think all of us will endorse whoever wins. The question, though, is that as we pursue that, we must be open with our record. I don't question your commitment. I ask you to account for your record. And you, and as you say, your defender can say what they want. I have a right to do that as anyone else. And to talk about just endorsements rather than answer our record, I don't think answers the question. I could bring all kind of endorsers here from Congressman Ed Towns and Johnny Cochran. I think you only need co-signers if your credit is bad.
Okay, well. All right, now, if you allow me, we're going to change the subject now to immigration, and you're all going to be very happy because this is a question to all of you. And you're all going to be very happy because it's one of those questions that you get to answer raising your hand if it's an affirmative answer. As you know, many illegal immigrants come into this country and they get started in America as domestic workers or day laborers. Have you or any member of your family hired an illegal immigrant? And would you raise your hand if it's positive? If it's yes, raise your hand. No one has. Okay. You all seem pretty shocked. It's more common than you all think, but all right. Okay, let's go on to the next question because there's other questions. Governor Dean, thousands of Hispanic soldiers risk their lives for this country and are not U.S. citizens. As president, would you automatically grant citizenship to any immigrant who serves in combat on behalf of the United States?
You have to be a little bit careful about how you do that because otherwise you'll have a disproportionate number of people who are Hispanic joining the Army simply to do that. But the basic answer, the direction of your question is the right one. The answer is going to end up being yes, one way or the other.
Let me interrupt you 1 second. There's a lot of Hispanics that join the Army regardless because Puerto Ricans are naturally born citizens and they still join.
One of the most unfortunate things I think that happened in the Iraq War was a young man who was Hispanic, who was an immigrant, who got killed, who was then got his citizenship given to him after he had arrived home in a casket. That is the wrong thing to do. So my attitude is if you join the Army, yes, it should give you an absolute path to earned legalization or to citizenship. But if you simply, what I want, the answer is basically yes, but here's why I'm sort of jumping around a little bit. If you simply say that, then my concern is that the Army becomes the haven for people who are struggling to get by because they happen to be Hispanic is the only way to become a United States citizen. We don't want to force Hispanic citizens into that position. So the answer is if you serve America, yes, you ought to get citizenship. But we have to be very careful just exactly how we offer that so we don't have an unfair, disproportionate effect on the Hispanics in this country who are not citizens.
Kucinich, could you please, Representative Kucinich, please answer.
I'm glad that Governor Dean clarified that because I don't think that first of all, that we all agree that people ought to have citizenship if they serve this country. We also ought to agree that there ought to be amnesty for anyone who's been working in this country and would otherwise be denied rights. The third thing we ought to talk about is that how the Bush administration's program that they just announced is really a program for indentured servitude. Because what they're talking about is locking people into control by corporations, and then if they don't go along with a program which is generally anti-union, low wages, they can get deported. We need to be better than that as an American country. We need to remember that we are a nation of immigrants. And as a nation of immigrants, we must always hold the promise of people coming into this country and pursuing their dream. You know, the Statue of Liberty, the poem at the base didn't say, give me your tired, your poor, and we will fingerprint them, we will take their picture, and then we will deport them after we're finished getting their work.
Thank you very much. We're going to go now. We have Lester now on the floor with another question from our distinguished panel of guests.
Maria, thank you. I'm with Rebecca Verhilgen, the Secretary of State of New Mexico. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. Your question is to who regarding immigration?
Thank you. Actually, Lester, I have two questions. My first has to do with immigration, and my second one has to do with, obviously, the issue that Senator Lieberman brought up with the Help America Vote Act. While immigration...
I'm sorry, who are you addressing this one to?
Well, my first question will go to Congressman Gephardt and Senator Lieberman. While immigration experts estimate that there are between 6 and 8 million legal permanent residents eligible to become citizens of the United States, they also estimate that less than half of them will seek to become citizens. When asked why they have not begun the naturalization process, a majority of immigrants said they had heard too many horror stories about the bureaucratic process as well as the skyrocketing application fees. If elected president, what will you do to encourage those who are eligible to apply for citizenship and ensure that those who seek to apply for citizenship are receiving quality customer service and being treated fairly? Congressman Gephardt, you first, and then Senator.
This is a very, very important issue. About 8 years ago, a lot of us in the House, in the Hispanic caucus, the Black caucus, tried to address this question, and we tried to get reform in the Immigration Service. And when the Republicans came back in, they took out all the reforms. The Immigration Service has been a mess. They do not process these applications quickly. It's a long, long process that takes far too long than it should, and it needs to be reformed. And we need to make people welcome in this country. If people are applying to be citizens, they needed to be treated as customers, and it needs to be an expedited process. There are people that wait 3 years to go through the process. It's a disaster, and when I'm president, we will reform it and we will change it.
Senator Lieberman.
Thank you very much. This question of immigration is more than an issue to me. I consider it a very personal matter. My grandparents were immigrants. I grew up with my grandmother who was an immigrant. My wife herself is an immigrant. So immigration to me is what America is all about. And the immigration system in our country today is broken. George W. Bush has pulled a bait and switch with this latest proposal. It is an election year conversion. He did it in 2000, didn't do anything for 3 years, and in 2004 comes in with a proposal that basically says to undocumented immigrants, come on, we'll give you a temporary work permit, then we're going to send you back to the country you came from, and you got to try to get back in. Well, who's going to come out of the shadows for that reason? I went to Nogales in Arizona earlier in the year. That day, 4 immigrants from Mexico died in the desert trying to come to America for the same reason my grandparents did, for a better way of life. So I am for earned right of legalization for undocumented immigrants. I am for temporary worker permits for people coming over. I'm for lifting the cap on family reunification, which keeps immigrant families apart, and I'm for lifting the cap on political refugees. We're one nation under God, individual liberty and justice for all. And that means making sure that our immigrants, new Americans, are treated fairly.
And Madam Secretary, you have one more question.
Yes,
you can
I
address
do.
it just to one member of our panel.
Well, actually, these are directed to 2 people, if you don't mind, because this is very crucial. Senator Edwards and Senator Kerry. On the Help America Vote Act, Congress last year passed the Help America Vote Act, a bill designed to address the electoral problems that arose from the 2000 presidential election. While the states have the responsibility of implementing many of the provisions of the bill, the federal government has a key oversight and financial role to play in 2005 and beyond. Secretaries of states, state legislators, and elections officials across the country have already complained that many of the provisions of HAVA are unfunded mandates. What will you do as president to assure elections officials that the federal government is committed to making the Help America Vote Act work as Congress intended? Senator Edwards and then Senator Kerry.
Cite the letter, John.
What I'll do as president is, first of all, fund the legislation, and second, make sure that every single person in America gets a chance to be on a voter registration roll and that they get a chance to vote, no matter what the level of the community that they live in. Because we know what's happening here. President Bush has figured out, he had to go along with election reform. He didn't have any choice about that because he got dragged kicking and screaming to that. But he knows if this bill is funded, we're going to have people, particularly in poorer areas, poor voting districts, all over America, who actually get a chance to exercise their right in this democracy. And I think he's got a pretty good idea of who they're going to vote for, don't you? So that it is critically important that we make the changes that need to be made to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to both register and vote, and we don't have happen what happened in Florida in 2000.
Senator Kerry, your response to that question?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I should thank you for letting me get back in the debate. I appreciate it. I will not only do what John has said, but I'm not going to wait until I'm president. When I'm the nominee of the party, I intend to put together a legal team across this country. And we are going to pre-challenge some of these automatic machines, the Diebold machines, where there have already been problems. And we're going to pre-challenge and have a team across this country who are focused on those particular areas of the country where they are notorious about switching addresses, telling people they're not registered, intimidating people, and we will have the strongest democracy poll-watching effort in the history of this country so that every vote is counted so I can become President of the United States.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Kerry, thank you. Secretary of State Braun, thank you very much for your question.
I had a little time left. I want to just finish. I disagree completely with what Howard Dean has said about the military. I said at the debate that we had in Arizona, there are 37,000 people serving in the services today who are legal immigrants. Legal. They go into the military already to do better and to gain a foothold on citizenship in America. And I think because it's a volunteer army and there are already standards about who gets in and who doesn't, that anybody who serves the United States of America who is a legal immigrant ought to get automatic citizenship immediately. Period. End of issue.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to let Governor Dean respond briefly.
I think that's a fine idea. I just want to make sure that it's fair when it happens. Look, I think that people who have already proved that they can be good citizens ought to be good citizens. The concern I have, John, is not a fundamental philosophical concern. The concern I have is I don't want Hispanic kids choosing to go to Iraq in order simply to gain citizenship. And that's what we have to be careful of when we do it. I think there's not a fundamental philosophical difference between us. I just want to be very careful about how we do this so we don't get a flood of desperate kids coming into the military and ending up in Iraq simply to get American citizenship.
Can I say something? Excuse me. I'm going to make a comment about this as a Puerto Rican because there's a lot of Puerto Ricans that are naturally born citizens of the United States, and they join the Army because they want to. I just want to make that clarification. Anyway, I'm going to continue with the next question. In the United States, illegal immigrants are forbidden to obtain driver's license, yet they do drive, millions of them every day. That is a reality. And because they don't have a license, they're unable to get car insurance, for example. But that's not just it. They also have all kinds of things and problems that ordinary citizens, American citizens, take for granted, and they cannot do it, like, for example, cash a check. As president, I'm going to address this question to you, Senator Lieberman. Would you definitely remove this? Would you allow driver's license for immigrants?
Yeah, I absolutely would. And I would because it is obviously better for those immigrants and for the rest of America that they be driving with a license instead of without a license. And if they have a license, they're more likely to be driving with insurance. So it makes no sense to me to punitively deprive them of that opportunity. I would just say to Governor Dean, he raises an important question, but the dilemma is solved with a very easy step, and it is to make sure that at the same time we grant citizenship to immigrants who serve in the military, we grant the earned right of legalization to all undocumented immigrants who have no trouble with the law and have paid their taxes, working hard, filling jobs that have not been filled by Americans. So if we do them all at once, everybody will enjoy the benefits of American citizenship, and we will enjoy the benefits of their service and loyalty to our country. The new Americans have an appreciation of America that is often greater than those who've been here a long time. And we force them to live in the shadows. Let's bring them out and strengthen our country.
That is correct. And I'm going to pass now with Ambassador Mosley Braun, because this is definitely an issue that goes beyond just having car insurance or not. They lack a proper identification document that lets them live like the rest of us in America.
I think in the first instance, as president, I would work closely with the governments of other governments, particularly with Mexico, President Fox now, to work out treaty arrangements, to work out protocols, to work out the kind of arrangements that would give some semblance of order to this process, so that when people come back and forth across the border, they're not dying in the deserts, they're not driving cars without insurance, without licenses, so there's some sense that they'll know what the rules are. We want to encourage people to obey the rules, but when the rules don't make any sense, and when the process, as Dick Gephardt rightly points out, is so convoluted and messed up, it's very difficult to expect compliance with the law. I think we need to reform immigration policy. We need to work with our neighbors. We need to give people a sense of being welcome in this land of immigrants.
Thank you. This question is for Senator Edwards. You have said several times that your immigration policy is a simple one. You propose, quote, a warm welcome to immigrants and visitors and exhaustive barriers against terrorists. Since, of course, we all know that terrorists don't arrive wearing a label, how would you distinguish or differentiate one from the others?
Well, first of all, let me say that the whole notion of earned citizenship is something that I strongly support. The second thing, and this is in response to the question that you're asking, is we have to do a much better job. I would first, and I should add to what I just said, I would expand the number of legal immigrants that can get into the country, which helps relieve some of this pressure that we have right now. And third, and this was mentioned in passing by someone just a minute ago, but what's happened with this president is our relationship with Mexico and President Fox is in the worst shape that we can imagine. And the result of that is we don't have the kind of security along our southern border that we need. First of all, we don't have the resources and technology that we ourselves need to provide on our side of the border, and we don't have the cooperation of the Mexican government. In order to provide a real and meaningful secure border, we need to do that. So, earned citizenship. Second, do a better job of protecting our southern border with a better relationship with Mexico. And third, expand the number of legal immigrants who are able to get into this country.
Okay, well, my next question is to Representative Gephardt. In some communities, large numbers of illegal immigrants have created burdens at the local level, and they're definitely creating burdens on local taxpayers as well as overburden in schools and social services. Everything is strained. Since immigration, it's a national policy, and illegal immigration a national concern, why should it be a local burden? As president, how would you correct that problem?
I think the federal government needs to help state and local government in dealing with these needs. If people are here, if children are here, they have to be educated. They have to get basic health care immunizations. And the federal government needs to fill some of that need. My health care plan would give billions of dollars to state and local governments for health care for their employees. And much of that money could be used for purposes like this. I also want to say I agree entirely with what's been said about earned legalization. If people have been here, obeyed the laws, paid their taxes, worked hard, they deserve the right to be able to get into legal status. I wrote a bill with the Hispanic Caucus that achieves precisely that. One other thought. My international minimum wage proposal is also an attempt to begin getting people treated fairly around the globe. We've let our trade policy be written by the big corporations who want cheap labor, who don't want a minimum wage in these countries. 3.5 billion people in the world today live on less than $1 a day. It's immoral. These people are being exploited for the quick profits of a few corporations. We need a trade policy that says anybody in the world who works gets to be treated like a human being and not exploited.
Thank you for your response. We're going to take a break and come back from Des Moines and the battle for the White House in a second. Welcome back to the Iowa Brown-Black Forum. We're going to continue with the questions for the candidates, and now Lester Holt once again.
Maria Celeste, thank you very much. Senator Kerry, this is your opportunity now to ask a question of one of your opponents.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thanks to all the candidates that have participated in this debate. We hope that this event helped throw light into the people of Iowa and into everybody that is going to vote in the United States so that they can make the best choice at the time they had to cast their votes because they got to know you a little bit better.
And we certainly want to thank the folks at the Iowa Brown-Black Forum for organizing this event tonight, and our wonderful audience as well. Thank you so much for being a part of this tonight. And Maria Celeste Aranas, not only can I pronounce your name, but it's been a real pleasure to work with you as well.
Thank you, Lester Holt. I hope it repeats again.
Okay. And we will see you again. The next debate on MSNBC, January 29th from South Carolina, anchored by NBC's Tom Brokaw. For Maria Celeste Aranas, I'm Lester Holt. So long, everyone.
You know how to say my last name, but not his name?
I can't say Brokaw, but I can say Maria Celeste Aranas. So long, everybody.
Thank you.